Welcome, everybody, to the Silver Screen Action Figure Podcast. This is your host, Andre Joseph of AJFX Productions, and I'm back once again with my usual Cinephiles partner in crime, Mr. Jeff Gallashaw. Say hello.
Hello, folks. How are all of you out there?
Yes, it's a very gloomy day out here with the tropical storm, but we're still making it through. We're still chugging along with our podcast here. So, we're going to kind of talk about our lists that we have of the movies that we wish had action figure lines
Mm-hmm.
and kind of go by them one by one and kind of talk about what our ideas would have been if they did make those merchandise back in those days, and even films that may have come out recently that could certainly benefit from it. So why don't we start with you? What's the first film that comes to mind?
Well, mine is kind of an easy, obvious one. We didn't grow up with it, but it was more recent. I'm amazed that they never, or at least I never heard of them coming out with a toy line for the Matrix. And I mean, I know the movie is more geared towards adult, but it was one of those movies where everybody saw it. Kids weren't supposed to see it because it's rated R, but they saw it anyway. Because there wasn't, other than violence, there was nothing really like too objectionable in it. And the thing that also, I guess it's like when we were growing up, you had everything tie in. If it was like a big summer blockbuster or just a blockbuster, it was like, let's tie in this toy line, let's tie in this soundtrack, let's tie in like, whatever fast food restaurant deal we could get. I mean, come on. I think even Speed 2 had not figures, but fast food. So my thing would be like I know the Matrix was maybe more of a surprise hit, but it was something that looked expensive even at the time. And obviously nobody saw Bullet Time coming. But I mean, I know now with sci-fi, it's a dime a dozen. Movies look, very expensive, but it's like, oh, the budget was only that. But I mean, I'm shocked even after it became a hit, like when parts 2 and 3 were coming out, they weren't trying to go out there and tie in like toy lines or something like that. Now you could probably find a Funko. And I mean, another thing I've noticed more of, like, not only with the Funko, but now like for your cult movies that might have bombed but now are famous, you'll find a lot of them also have like t-shirts, that never were available back in the day. Like, I don't know if you go to Urban Outfitters or not, but like Poetic Justice now all of a sudden is everywhere on hoodies, t-shirts, hat, more than I remember when the movie came out and even having merchandising. I only remember the hat, and that was more like, oh, you worked on the movie, here's a crew hat. And
Yes, I got
so,
a,
good.
so I got a little bit of trivia about the Matrix. There actually was an action figure line for it, but it was just very scarce to get. There was a company called N2 Toys. This was compromising of a number of former employees of Kenner who started their own independent company, and they got licenses for the Matrix, Big Trouble Little China, and I believe they even made, you know what, they actually made a couple of other like standalone figures for like Above the Law with Steven Seagal. They made a Rambo figure. They made a couple of action figures that I think they eventually sprung over into NECA, but they
Mm-hmm.
did have like a Neo and a Trinity and a Morpheus. And I don't think you could find them in Toys R Us. I think you were only able to get them in FYE, Spencer, Sam Goody back then. And
Yeah, place I notoriously did not go to or have access to.
right,
And
and they were probably ridiculously priced too. So, I mean, at that point, I wasn't collecting as much, so I wasn't like something that I was going to run out and get, try to play with my friends with. And I do also know that McFarlane made figures for the sequel. And I think only like when Reloaded came out, they had like a whole bunch of figures of all the characters from the movie and even the video game Enter the Matrix. But we have our own feelings about the film. It just at that point I was in college, so I wasn't really grabbing all that stuff. So for me, because I got a whole list that compromises of 80s and 90s films,
okay.
mostly the stuff that I remember growing up on. So the one, the number one movie to me that should have had toys for Circuit. Now, apparently, if you remember Short Circuit 2, the whole plot of the film involved Fisher Stevens' character Ben making a bunch of toy Johnny Fives, and that
Yeah.
causes him to get this deal with a toy company, and he's fallen with a girl that works there, and they want to build like, I don't know, 800,000 of these things. He can't do it, and Steve Gutenberg sends Johnny Five over to actually build them for him, and you have this whole caper going on. So I remember as a kid, I didn't see the first film in the theater. I saw it on HBO, and my parents recorded it, or my uncle or my aunt, one of the two. And I used to watch the first movie religiously on tape because, I mean, seeing a live robot back then, you had the Nintendo and you had the, on the robot. I mean, that was like certainly something that, like, oh my God, this is the life, and I really want to get this thing. And so when I saw Short Circuit 2 in the theater, I was like, I want one of those for Christmas. And they never came out with them. I found out years later that Matchbox was planning to release that very remote control Johnny Five. I saw it in a Toy Fair catalog on eBay, and it was set to come out that Christmas, but the movie bombed, so they just decided not to re-release it. And I know that Funko planned on making some kind of a pop. They actually have a design, I think, in one of these YouTube videos in the back. Like, they have all these different concepts for different licenses they were planning to get. And one of them was a number 5, but again, I guess they couldn't get the license. So, I mean, I'm still holding out for it. I know there's models of it you could buy on eBay, but you have to assemble them, and I don't want to do that. So, I mean, that's still like on my wish list to ever see, something in the store.
I mean, I could see it as a doll. I don't know if I'd see it as as them making it remote controlled anymore. That's something you might have to look up one of those inventors who make like movie props for real and do. And
Yeah,
that is a good one. I'm also very shocked that did not come out with a toy line, even though I know I never saw any. I mean, my thing is you can always convert a Wally into a Johnny Five, and they look.
Same.
It's like his little brother. So, my next pick, this one, I'm sure, like, other toy lines have eventually made this action figure, but I'm shocked at the time because it would have meant a lot for representation at the time, considering you really only had Roadblock from G.I. Joe, maybe, as, a black figure, or maybe a weird Michael Jackson, but how come there was never a Beverly Hills Cop figure or toy line? I mean, I know it's more adult again, but let's face it, everybody and their brother saw this movie, and kids were watching it who probably weren't, and I don't see what's wrong with an Axel Foley doll when you got, like, a Terminator. You got, I'm sure they didn't come out with it, but someone could easily convert a Terminator into a Commando toy or a Predator toy. And you had Rambo, who somehow became a cartoon. So you're telling me Beverly Hills Cop's too profane for it to be like for kids to find a hero in a streetwise cop from Detroit who goes to Beverly Hills and solves crimes? And
I think a figure line from the second movie would have been really cool. You could have had. First of all, you could have figures from both 1 and 2. Forget about 3. That was just an abomination. But imagine if you had like Axel Foley. Have Axel Foley in the hoodie from the first movie, then have Axel Foley with the Detroit Lions jacket, and you make figures of Rosewood, Taggart, maybe make a Bridget Nielsen figure, because she certainly looked like an action figure in herself, and. You could have the Beverly Hills Police Station as a play set because it had like that sort of. Martin Brest was supposed to do war games, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he got fired from that, and then he took the idea for the NORAD set. He made it into the Beverly Hills Police Station in Cop 1. So that would have been a cool play set to have, and maybe even like one of the the bad guy's mansion or the oil field in the second one. That could have been a play set too. And yeah, I mean, even a talking Axel Foley doll that obviously wouldn't be profane, but it would have Eddie Murphy's voice on it, saying all these wisecracking jokes and stuff.
Exactly, it sells itself. And
I actually I know Super 7 is doing like a Q&A thing right now. Like they have people sending questions that they can answer in their Instagram videos. And actually, they don't answer anybody's requests, but I'm always requesting, like, I want reaction figures of Beverly Hills Cop, Bad Boys, and the TV show V. If you get me those three, I would be a very happy man.
You already just revealed some of your other picks on your list, and
Weirdly enough, Bad Boys was not on my list because I already
oh,
have one.
okay. um, so
Wait,
like,
that's my turn to mention my next pick.
okay. So what is your next pick?
My next pick is Inner Space.
See, this one I'm glad to disagree with you on. I'm glad there's no toys. Look, I like Joe Dante. The movie is all of okay, but I don't love it as much as other people do. I'm sorry.
That was another, like, one of those guilty pleasures I had as a kid, just watching that constantly when it was on HBO. I always wanted that flying ship as a model, or as, like, even just, a little playset with a little Dennis Quaid in it. And even Vernon Wells, when he gets into, like, the machine and he has to fight off Dennis Quaid. I mean, that could have been a cool thing to have. Maybe a little gross because, inside Martin Short's body, but I don't know. It was just appealing to me back in those days.
I feel like, and then what? You have Martin Short, and Martin Short, once his face has been changed into the Texan.
Oh, that would be pretty awesome.
Oh, jeez, no. If it had been made, that would have been definitely a toy line. I would have skipped, like, no, thank you. And that movie was very disappointing when I saw it. I haven't seen it in years, but I have a funny feeling it would still be disappointing. And because, God.
No, I was going to say Joe Dante. He did an auction a few years ago. Actually, it was a Kickstarter campaign for a movie he was doing, and one of the rewards was you could get the model ship from Inner Space, but it was like ridiculously pricey to get.
I can imagine. I'm like, the weird thing is, if it had been maybe somewhat affordable and I had heard of it, I might have, just for like the movie history aspect of it, but it's not a movie I can say I love. And my next pick is keeping with this out of left field toys. Okay, since again we're talking about representation, this movie was a horror movie, but wasn't really that scary. But I know it kind of meant a lot to a certain generation of women. And I'm like, I know the movie was only a mild hit, but how come nobody ever made any toys based on The Craft?
Yeah.
Because I'm like, girls, well, they like to sell dolls to girls. So now you can show that girls can be different or be goth, and they can have their own sets of dolls. And again, you have a little black girl doll, who actually has some powers. That would have been cool. I mean, really would have been the four of them. I guess you could treat the boys like kind of like, they're Kens, which now thinking about this idea, it gives you a whole new way to watch the movie too. But I mean, do we make one with the girl's hair falling out of the racist girl? That might not have sold well with kids because, then some of the blonde white girls would be like, oh, this is the one that most represents me, But, okay, since you're talking about play sets, the witch shop, we could have a whole play set of that. The party where, spoiler alert, Skeet Ulrich plummets to his death. We could have a whole set of that. I'm telling you, this thing sells itself. And especially now that since it's such a cult movie, if somebody really wanted to push that out and could get the licensing, I'm telling you, that would sell very well.
I agree. I definitely think dolls would have been a big deal back then. And I also could have seen, like, McFarlane Toys make a whole bunch of craft figures. I think just the way you look at the poster alone, and it screams Todd McFarlane making action figures for that film. I mean, I think he did some stuff for The Crow, but like years after the movie came out, and that was the kind of vibe that I would get from something like The Craft. So I think getting the likenesses of Rachel True and Fariza Balk and Nev Campbell, Robin Tine, that would have been great. And I think girls definitely would have gone for that as well as guys.
Exactly. I know I would have had a set. I mean, I have a set of Reservoir Dogs figures, so why not?
Yeah, it's pretty much in the same league from that period, and certainly I think teenage girls would have loved to have that stuff in their room.
Exactly. Would have gone with like that see-through Lego phone. And
So my next pick, this actually almost happened, but because it was such a notorious flop, it just got canceled right out of everybody's feet. And that movie is 1986's Howard the Duck.
I can
So
see that.
apparently LJN was planning to make a Howard the Duck toy line. I don't know what it would have looked like. Only thing I've seen online was an unreleased plush doll of Howard the Duck, and it's actually on my Silver Screen Action Figure Podcast page. If you look into the photos, I have it posted there. But
Okay.
I think the figure line was going to be similar to what they ended up doing later with Roger Rabbit. I think it was going to be a couple of like G.I. Joe size figures, and then there would probably be some bendables. So it would be like Howard the Duck, Beverly, the character Tim Robbins played. Jeffrey Jones's character would have had a figure. I'm pretty sure they would have made the Dark Overlord, the creature at the end of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And probably even that little propeller plane that they have at the end, you know, when they're trying to like go and save Leah Thompson. So that movie definitely screamed for it, and weirdly enough, it's another one of those guilty pleasures I grew up with as a kid before I realized how bad it was. I know Marvel since then has made a number of Howard the Duck toys based on the comic, but I think in this day and age, they should revisit that for sure.
I definitely would have gotten a Howard the Duck because as a kid, I actually liked the movie. So, you know, as I get older, I can see why this movie is like considered bad or wrong, but it's still a guilty pleasure because it's more nostalgia. You grew up with it, so it's just like, wow, you know, like when I was a kid, I loved this movie. I mean, it's still better than watching Small Wonder now. So it's like at least I can watch Howard the Duck and still be entertained. You know. I guess I'm gonna go with another weird one. I think all mine, other than the Beverly Hills Cop ones, are weird. Okay, picture it. It's the 1990s. One of the world's biggest action stars is about to set forth on a sci-fi adventure that kind of sounds wonky, but the studio is willing to spend over $100 million. And it is a great epic that seems like almost a water park. That's right, I'm dealing with Waterworld toys. Where the hell are those? I definitely wouldn't have bought them at the time. Now definitely would have.
I hate to break it to you, Jeff, there was a Waterworld line.
Oh, man!
Kenner. That's right. Kenner made a whole bunch of Waterworld figures, and they even took molds of Kevin Costner's head from Robin Hood, and they recycled it for these figures. But they didn't release them all. There were a bunch of prototypes out there of like, I think Janine Triplehone's character was never released. They never released the girl. But you got a whole bunch of Kevin Costners, a whole bunch of Dennis Hoppers, some of the other side characters. They had the boat. But I remember seeing these because the movie just bombed so hard. They were in the clearance shelves like literally within a week. And you could find like a KB Toys. You could buy like 3 of the figures for $10. That's how much they wanted to get these things off the shelves.
See, if I had those, that would definitely be in a case somewhere. Because now that I'm older, I kind of wish I would have actively, even if a movie bombed or looked stupid, just collected them over the years so that now I can be like, hey, at least I still remember this movie, you know, and I got this toy. Like, to this day, I'll hate to say it, I kind of still want to just have a Jar Jar Binks just for the memory of the character. You know, so I stopped buying, unfortunately, toys at a certain point, or I only wanted to buy toys of movies I actually liked. What I would do now for some vintage Space Jam stuff. Well, okay, mark that one off my list because there was a toy line. What is your next?
eBay, get them. I don't think they're that expensive.
They better not be. I'm not paying top dollar for that. Well, at least it's only Kevin Costner and Dennis Hopper. Those would really be the only ones I'd want. So it's not like, oh, I want the little girl one. No, I don't care. And
That'll probably cost you some money to find a prototype.
yeah, because it's probably like a prototype only. And
So the next one for me, now I'm not gonna say I'm like the biggest fan of the world of this film, but I definitely think, given the time it came out and it was in the midst of the Star Wars craze,
oh no.
this is a movie that absolutely should have had a figure line, and that's the Neverending Story.
I agree. I'm shocked that never had a toy line.
Why was there no Falcor toy? Why wasn't there a plush doll? This film, everything about it screamed an action figure line of some kind. Maybe it was because kids didn't want to buy toys of kids. Maybe that was the issue. But everything about it, the sets, the creatures, the whole thing could easily have been a toy line. And I don't even see like NECA or Funko making anything for this film. It really is beyond me. If I'm wrong, then just please correct me in the comments, people.
Yeah, because I'm like, I would have loved to have had like just a toy like that. I mean, Neverending Story, maybe. Well, no, because it took Neverending Story 2 a while to get made, so it can't be like, oh, Neverending Story 2 killed the toys. But I wouldn't have minded an Atreyu. Maybe it was, since it was so meta at the time, that they were like, how do we market this to children? I mean, you could have had that, what is it, the 2 columns where he has to run past. Could have had that. The rock eater, the snail. For girls, it could have been the princess. I can see that. Yeah, I am shocked they dropped the ball on that. And I'm trying to think. See, do you know if Labyrinth ever had a toy line?
Not at the time, no. I think later they made a David Bowie figure, but not back when it came out.
Okay, see, that would have sold a lot. I mean, you really had to go through Muppet Mash. And the thing that kills me is put out by Jim Henson, who knows how to market toys. And it's like, you guys never decided to make a toy line for this? Maybe that would have helped the box office a little better, And,
yeah, I don't think, like, a lot of his movies, that Dark Crystal, even the Muppet movies, they didn't have, like, action figure lines back then. You have some Muppet toys here and there, but not, like, based on the actual films.
maybe that's why, eventually, Disney could buy him up, because maybe if he back in the day was thinking more about merchandising, maybe, the revenue would have gone up and he would have been, just as big as a Disneyland, even though he obviously wanted to get into more artistic and educational stuff, So that would have been my pick, but I wanted to double check because it was like, I think I've seen a David Bowie doll from there, but I wasn't sure if they came out with a whole toy line.
Yeah, that's the only one that I've seen. I don't think there were any others. The next one for me, now this is another movie that actually had been announced to have a toy line and then got canceled, and that was Batteries Not Included.
I could see it being a toy line, but I could also see why maybe they pulled it, or decided not to go forth with it. Because that, let's face it, that was kind of a bomb. And I think most people only remember it because Channel 11 used to always show it all the time. That's the only, and I'll admit, I don't even love that movie. I remember it fondly, but I can honestly say, like, I've never thought about, you know what, I'd really like to watch Batteries Not Included. Because, I mean, you have the older heavyweight boxer. He's definitely a figure other than the robots. But I don't know. Do you have, Pregnant Maria as an action figure? I don't know if parents are like, yeah, okay, we finally have a Hispanic doll. She's a pregnant single mother.
Yeah, I don't see kids buying a Hugh Cronin and Jessica Tandy toy back then. But LJN was supposed to make a whole bunch of those flying ships, and they were announced, but they were never released. But apparently, in Japan, there's a number of PVC toys that I actually showed in my Steven Spielberg episode, and those you can find on eBay. They're not even much to get, but it's nothing like what you see in the film. It's just they're like simply painted. They don't move. They just are what they are, and they're not even the size of the ones from the film.
So they're more like models.
Yeah, more like little plastic toys, like the little PVC toys you would see, like if you went to Disneyland or somewhere, and you went to like Star Tours, you buy like a PVC R2D2 and C3PO. They weren't like anything huge.
Oh, okay. I could see that. This one is just no. I'm not even gonna do it. This is the next one. I'll go to a more plausible one. I know this would never have made it because, especially since the movie bombed. This is more. I hate to say it. This is more me as a fan wishing that this had become a toy line. I would have liked, even though the movie's horrible, an Island of Dr. Moreau toy line. Because you have all these experiments, you could introduce them. Like, here's half cat, half human lady. Here's this breed we mixed together. It's its own Transformers. That I would have liked. I definitely want the Val Kilmer and the Marlon Brando. This is the one time I don't want the heroic line. I want more of the villain line of all this. And, I mean, I know kids probably couldn't see it or they'd be confused by watching it. But maybe that would have been the selling point. Sell it to the kids. And there's no sex. Oh, never mind. There's a whole animal orgy. Forgot about that. Hey, that could be a collectible set in of itself. I say that should have been a toy line, even if it was just more of an adult-centered toy line, you know? And
yeah, I think it would have been cool to see, like, maybe, like you said, like a Transformer type of figure where you have, like, human characters, you interchange them, they turn into the creatures, or, like, with the Batman figures, like, whenever they would do a Bruce Wayne, and then you snap on the Batman costume over Michael Keaton's body. Stuff like that could have worked, or maybe, like, take the figure, which just looks plain, then you put water on it, and suddenly it grows like a tattoo. They could have gotten creative with that.
hey, they did that with Zartan.
Yeah, it would have been easy to do back then.
Exactly, see? And
Okay, so another one of my favorites that I wish had a toy line, and actually, I did fulfill this wish many, many years later, but it took me a long time to do it. Little Shop of Horrors. I always wanted an Audrey 2, however way they would ever make it. And I know Milton Bradley made a game of like a Venus flytrap, like the one in the movie. And I remember buying this. I'm blanking on the name of it right now, but it was like you feed marbles into it.
I remember that game. Game.
That was like the closest thing to like a Little Shop of Horrors toy. But thankfully, Funko Pops, they made an Audrey 2. I bought it. It's in my display case. I haven't bought the Seymour or the Steve Martin character or anybody else. But, I mean, even at that time, it would have been kind of cool if we had something like that.
I would have enjoyed that, especially if they would have came out with the Bill Murray one, you know, or the Steve Martin. Even though I'm like, I don't know if they want to sell kids again. The abusive dentist, but you could feed them to Audrey, you know, if they created them. See, I had the one that I had in my head just popped out as soon as I started talking about Bill Murray. But I will go to another one that I know they never would have made it, but it would have been interesting. Cloak and Dagger toys.
Oh, wow. We're going way back.
I loved that movie. I would have liked to have had a Davy, you know, a Dabney Coleman as his imaginary friend, a Dabney Coleman as his father, the old people spies, you know, Morris, played by William Forsythe, and would become the model for nerds in movies for the next 20 years. You know, I would have loved all those toys. And my thing is, another film that was marketed, an adventure toy or movie that was marketed towards kids, but yet you guys didn't make any toys. Even though I know this was more life or death. But if this is supposed to be life or death, how the hell does a plane explode and Dabney Coleman just walk away? Uninjured with, some smoke on him. Unless they're really trying to play a psychological game, and that's really Jack. And his father died.
Yeah, well, I think they definitely had the potential to make figures. I think the only reason why they didn't was because they were so focused on selling that video game based on the film. And at that point, remember, they made that movie before the video game crash in '83, so that kind of screwed everything up before Nintendo came along and saved the whole industry. It was like really, it was a movie that was like caught in the wrong time period.
I would have loved it.
So for me, the next one now, this is a movie that I don't think anybody was considering for a toy line, but looking back at it, I think it could have had some potential to be really fun if they ever pulled it off, and that's Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
I could see that, but maybe because it was such a teen film, they felt like teens aren't going to buy this and kids aren't going to buy it.
But at that point, I mean, John Hughes, he already had 2 big hits. This was a huge hit. I'm sure there would have been kids that would have liked to play with a Matthew Broderick toy, have like a toy of the car, and, you know, just go for like a whole day of him, just doing whatever the hell they want, run from Principal Rooney, you know, and make a figure of him.
Yeah, that would have came back to bite them in the ass.
Yeah. At least a doll. I think they could have made a Ferris Bueller doll, and girls would have bought it.
And you could have got the model car, you know, and but I mean, my thing is, if you're gonna do that, you might as well like be like, hey, why don't we put these 18 again dolls on the market? With you can finally have your own George Burns and a Charlie Schlatter and Tony. God. What's his name? Tony Robbins. What was the guy who played? I guess George Burns' son in that movie.
Yeah, that was Charlie Shatler. Or no, that was his grandson.
Yeah, that's his grandson, but his father. Like Charlie Schlatter's father was played by Tony something, who was always in Woody Allen movies in the past.
Oh, Tony Roberts, I think.
Yeah, Tony Roberts. Yeah. I'm calling him Tony Robbins. And you could have got the one who played George Burns' mistress, the redheaded lady, who always played that same role.
Yeah.
For my pick, I would, sticking with that 1980s, like we're supposed to be hits. How come we never got a Flight of the Navigator toy? I'm like, Disney produced it. They put a lot of money behind it. You have this big walnut silver you could have sold as a playset with a Pee Wee Herman voice right before he broke it big. And you had a kid at the helm of this, plus that weird little alien thing he had. So I'm like, how did you guys not figure... Let's not do any toys for this. Let's just like sell it as a movie. I mean, it bombed, but still, it was perfect, even just for the spaceship. And
yeah, I just watched Flight of the Navigator for the first time last year, and I definitely see.
Damn.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's one of those ones that eluded me for a long time, but yeah, I mean that's another one that's certainly that ship, all the little creatures in it, that could have. Definitely have sold or something.
Yeah, and that's one of those ones where it was just like you just sit there on the sideline. How did you guys not sell this? It would have sold better than a DVD.
So now my next pick. Now Arnold Schwarzenegger, he's had a whole lot of toy lines: Terminator, Predator, even Commando. One movie I've always wanted to see him have a figure line for, and they never capitalized on it, was Total Recall. It had a horrible video game, but the film itself, and coming off of RoboCop, which also had a toy line, and it was a Paul Verhoeven film, this was perfect. Everything about that film screams action figures, play sets, you know, like do a Mars play set, get a Michael Ironside figure, Sharon Stone figure, and maybe like have Michael Ironside's arms get ripped off. I mean, that could have been really cool back then.
But see, that's why I think that kept it away from it. It's sort of like the Toxic Avenger. They couldn't sell those toys, so they came up with the cartoon, family-friendly Toxic Crusader toys. It would be the same thing with Total Recall. You'd have to totally saw, who wants a Quato? You know? Who's going to give their kid that? You know? Or the guy with the half-burned face. It's like, I mean, and not to mention the obvious one that most boys would want, the three-breasted hooker. You know, it's like, yeah, imagine trying to ask your parents for that for Christmas. That would have to be one of those, it is purely adult. Because that's more, no offense, most of those figures would have to be horror toys. That would be like, hey, I want a Freddy Krueger action figure. And it's like, you're not going to give that to a child. You know? And
shockingly, like, none of the companies now have made anything based on that film. And certainly adult collectors would totally buy that stuff. Even a chick with 3 breasts.
Do you think it's maybe because of the remake? And
Uh, yes and no, but I think it's more of a licensing issue since that was a straight Carol Cove movie, and I don't know who has the rights now, but I think it's really more of that whole issue, and maybe getting Sharon Stone's likeness is too expensive. I don't know.
I can't imagine she's that. It's not like she's like this big superstar anymore. It's like, come on, really? You're the holdout, Sharon Stone. It's, you know, Rachel Ticotin will sign that contract in a second. So
Whatever happened to her?
she divorced David Caruso, and then nobody really heard from her after that. Except, no, she was in Falling Down. That was the last time I remember seeing her in anything.
Last time I saw her was in Man on Fire.
Who was she in Man on Fire?
Play like a reporter.
Oh, so that's sort of like Paz Vega in the Rambo movie, where it's like, that's Paz Vega?
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, it was pretty much that type of role.
Oh, man. Here is one, again, I might be mistaken. This might have come out with a toy line, but I don't remember it. How do you not have the Last Starfighter toy line? And
There was a Last Starfighter toy line, but I don't
see?
No, you're right. I don't think it was released, though. I think Galoob had a whole set of Star Wars-sized figures, and they had, like, the ship.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a catalog, if you search on Google, where you can find all of this. But for whatever reason, it never came out.
That would make more sense because you have the ship, you have all these different aliens, you have the video game. You know, this is obviously made for like 13 and 14-year-olds, and you don't sell any toys. It was like, I mean, it's probably Lance Guest's biggest role ever, and okay, that is memorable, unless you want to count Halloween 2.
Or Jaws of Revenge.
I think even he'd like to forget he was in that movie.
But the paycheck was too good.
Hey, but I'm sure it wasn't as nice as Michael Caine's, though.
Yeah, so the next one I have now, I'm kind of still on the action movie front. Timecop.
So, jeez.
I know a lot of Van Damme movies, except for Street Fighter, had action figures going on, or didn't have action figures. But this one, only because it was like a cool sci-fi type of setup, you know, the costume and the little ship he goes on to go through time. I think he could have had some potential.
I mean, but really the only figure you'd want is Jean-Claude Van Damme and maybe the machine that takes them back in time. Who's going to be like, I want a Ron Silver doll, you know? Let's face it. Look, I like Timecop, but it lacks a villain he can go hand-to-hand combat with, you know?
Oh, not like that piggish-looking thug that...
You don't want to buy the right-hand man doll. You want to buy doll to fight the hero doll. It's like, that is why I'd be like, I'd veto a time. Though, you'd have his black partner, a black female doll, but the problem would be, yeah, but she's a turncoat. So, it's like, you can't, so it's like, that's a bad representation right there. And so, but I could see it. I mean, considering it seemed like all Arnold Schwarzenegger had to do was sneeze in a movie and they came out with a toy line, I don't see why it was like where Jean-Claude Van Damme's films seemed too like rough for them to make like toy lines for. I mean, look at, even though he wasn't a star at this point, but imagine Cyborg, you know, as a toy line. You had all the futuristic, distinct looks and him being the most normal looking person in the movie. You know, when you had the dude who looks like the saxophone man as the villain. And
that's crazy, too, because I think because that movie originally started as Canon Films running out of money to make their Spider-Man movie and their Masters of the Universe sequel and just scrapped everything. They just took the sets, the costumes, and just made Cyborg out of it. Why not cut a deal with Mattel and make a bunch of Cyborg toys?
Exactly. I mean, I don't think it's as well remembered today, but I'm like, back in the day, like once Jean-Claude started getting clout and, you know, Channel 11 showed every movie he ever made, that would have been a perfect toy for a line for that right then and there. So I'm just like, I would pick Cyborg, even though Timecop has more popularity. But I feel like you have more to sell with Cyborg figures, and then maybe Cyborg wouldn't be as embarrassing as the DC version. And my next one is a movie, probably, unless you really watched a lot of cable in the 80s, you don't remember this movie. But if you were around, you remember this. Enemy Mine, the toys.
I was thinking about that today, yeah.
Because I'm like, you have aliens, you have them learning to live together, you have pregnant male, which Alien Nations ripped off, and I mean, it might have been hard to come up with figures other than those two, but I mean, come on, you know, maybe, and then maybe it could have continued into a cartoon adventure, you know. I would have loved to have had those toys. And
well, I mean, Fox had a lot of high expectations for that movie. They thought it was going to be the big Christmas hit, and it just flat out tanked. I mean, we love it now because it's a cult classic, but at that time, I think because the story was too deep, too much like the Defiant ones, maybe young audiences were turned off. They wanted to go see, I don't know, European Vacation or one of those other movies at the time. But yeah, I think if it had been a hit, you would have seen some toys for sure.
yeah, that I wouldn't have minded seeing. And
The next one for me now, again, I'm still on the action movie kick.
okay.
Cobra with Sylvester Stallone. Because you had Rocky figures, particularly from the third one, you had the Rambo figures. Why not do Cobra? I mean, the character was cool. You had some crazy ass psycho villains, and he had the car, he had the gun. That, I mean, in the 80s, you could have even just made a water gun out of that Uzi of his before they started banning that stuff, toy stores. It was the perfect 80s toy line.
Well, I mean, it would be the perfect Stallone figure. But I mean, the thing I remember most about that movie is the knife of the villains. Yeah. That could have sold with his figure, and I figure everybody would want it. But past that, I'd be like, okay, now they got the knife guy and maybe the Stallone guy. I'm good, unless you really want a Brigitte Nielsen one. You know, oh, you could be the damsel in distress, you know, randomly. But, I mean, I guess, yeah, I'd buy it for the nostalgia sake, but I don't think I would have bought it at the time. You know, I would have been like, it's a Stallone figure. It's a Stallone figure. I got enough Rambos. Why do I need this one for? This one, I know no one in their right mind would have ever made it, but I would have appreciated it. And the reason they would never make it, what are you going to do with it? Daryl.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Because, I mean, unless he just, like, comes apart and you can build him back up, I mean, there's no real villain unless you just want to get some random army guys. And what? You're just going to, like, it would be like the male version of Barbie playing house if you got all these figures together. You know, I mean, other than, what, Turtle? That would have been the only cool other one to have. You know? But I did, that is a movie I enjoy, and it's this genre I feel is still missing now. This is why I get excited when somebody says, oh, this is going to be like an Amblin movie. These movies where you could let kids be adventurous and have their own little adventures they could die. They're not going to. We all know that, but they could. And I miss movies like that. We all celebrate like movies like The Goonies, but no one ever talks about the Darryls, the Cloak and Daggers, the Flight of the Navigators that aren't made for little kids, but for that perfect like 13-year-old who wanted to see themselves in a movie, you know? Those are the movies I still miss. And all of these would have been prime examples where you could have did some major marketing. Because nobody wants to make, I guess, figures back then of teen movie characters. So it's like, these are just slightly younger for that audience that still buys this stuff. So to me, that would have been the perfect, those would have been like the perfect toys and movies to make toys out of. And so
we're supposed to be making a Daryl sequel for, I think for cable, and it could be an adult. They're obviously recast the role, but it's going to be more of a comedy. So it's going to be like him as an adult not being able to adjust to life properly, know he's a robot.
I'd be like, they just think he's autistic. I was like, okay. And not to mention, then I'd have to be like, how is this? How you're gonna have to explain how this software allows him to grow and not stay the same age as in the first film. And it wasn't like, oh, Daryl all of a sudden got pubes. So it's not like he's 100% normal, But that is a poster. I would love the original poster with all the microbes in his brain and them just watching them from like the army computers. I would love that poster. And
yeah, so my next pick. Now they would have never made toys for this back then, and then later they did. They've done some NECA figures and Funko Pops, but it would have been cool. And I have a particular vision for this if they ever did this. Die Hard. So what if they did a Die Hard set where they would make them G.I. Joe size? You have the playset of Nakatomi Plaza. Maybe you'll have like a couple of floors that are exposed, like the Ghostbusters Firehouse. And you could have like all kinds of contraptions where your Bruce Willis figure could swing around the building. You could have like pieces of the building fall off and burn up and things like that. I think that would have been awesome to have as a kid.
And the Coke snort yuppie character. And does he come with like the cocaine on his face? Yeah, I'd be like, oh man, that would have been an interesting sale. But I mean, I'm also shocked because, like I said, Arnold Schwarzenegger could do no wrong with his figure. So what? Why all of a sudden all the other action heroes they're like, what? Hold up, wait a minute, So I would have fully bought, some, I guess Die Hard, which then would, I mean, now since they never made Die Hard, they're never gonna make a Passenger 57 doll. But I mean, you have the terrorist crew all dressed up as airline people. You've got Bruce Wayne, who looks half the time like a living action figure villain. You have the love interest. You could have the ineffectual Tom Sizemore doll, just as the best friend. And then you have, obviously, Wesley Snipes, and you could interchange him with his outfit when he's on the plane, and then when he was doing, what was it, the test of flight at the beginning.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he had like a suit on or something.
Yeah, I mean, if you really want to go dark, you get the one where his wife is killed, that outfit he's wearing then. So for flashbacks...
I could have seen a figure of him on his motorcycle.
Definitely, see? I mean, well, he didn't really do much on that Ferris wheel, so I was going to say you could use that one, but...
Yeah.
And you could have the kind of prejudiced town sheriff. It'd be like your own, like, Dukes of Hazzard Boss Hog, only way thinner.
Oh my God. Okay, so the next one for me, they have made figures of this years later. They didn't do it at the time because they didn't think it was going to be a huge hit. And then there was merchandising for it after with the sequel. And I'm talking about Home Alone.
I'm shocked. But I mean, they had a lot of other merchandise from it other than like a toy line.
Well, when I was a kid, the second movie, they came out with a game. Like, remember like the apartment building that was completely gutted and he uses all the traps in that scene. So they actually made a game out of this where you have to you had set build and they had like these little it was like stickers on little shapes of Kevin and the Wet Bandits, and you just maneuver them around. It's probably on eBay somewhere. My thing is like broken into pieces. That was like the closest thing to like a Home Alone action figure and play set. I know NECA in later years, they've made a Kevin figure. They made a legit Wet Bandits. But back then, especially after the first movie was the phenomenon that it was, it totally could have had something more legit than, the stuff that we got, like the Talk Boy and all that.
Hey, I like the Talk Boy.
I like the Talk Boy too. I still have mine. But it's still stained. You can't even record anything on it.
Oh, because I was about to say I always wanted to get one. But at that point, I had seen Home Alone 1. I did not see Home Alone 2 till it came out on home video because I was just like, after the first one, I was home alone out that I'm like, I could wait, you know. And I'm like, I'm getting older. I'm becoming a teenager. I don't watch Home Alone movies. Here's one. I think I can maybe understand why it never got a toy line, but it would have did gangbusters, but it is more of a cult item. Animal Olympics, the animated movie. How come they never came out with toys for that?
I don't think I've ever seen that.
Oh my god, it has like voices of Billy Crystal. It's basically a kind of an animated thing where animals are like the humans and they're doing Olympic sports, but they have all these backstories and everything. And it spoofs, you know, like Wide World of Sports a little and everything. Even Gilda Radner does a voice on it. But that, I used to love that as a kid, but there were never any toys. And the beautiful thing is, you could also easily, not only toy lines, you could tie that up with like a Wheaties tie-in. And, you know, at the time, you know, because let's face it, during that time, they were trying to sell cereal to kids more than anything. So how come you didn't come up with this, even though you came up with a whole animated movie just to spoof Olympics, or maybe to make it more entertaining for kids while their parents were watching that? They go to theater and watch, oh, these animated animals do it. But yeah, that needed a toy line. And I think if it would have, I think the movie would have been more remembered today. And
yeah, I think, yeah, speaking of animated films, I'm shocked there was never a toy line for DuckTales the movie.
Was there a toy line for DuckTales, the TV show?
No, at that time they didn't do figures for. They done like Happy Meals and things like that, like Happy Meal toys. But there was never a DuckTales or a Chip and Dale toy line. Not until Tailspin and Darkwing Duck did, and I think Playmates handled them. And then years and years later, we've gotten some Funko reaction figures of all of those shows. But at that time, given how popular DuckTales was, nobody was making like action figure merchandise for that show or for the film. And that still shocks me.
That shocks me, because my thing is, I even still watch it and went to see that movie in theaters. And now no one will remember, what was the Neanderthal character's name?
Oh, I'm drawing a blank on that.
And see, to this day, with these new DuckTale adventures, they don't really have that character. Everybody remembers Gizmo Duck, though, you know.
Yeah, Gizmo Duck.
But nobody remembers, we can't even remember his name, the Neanderthal Duck.
Yeah, I'm drawing a blank, but my friend Albert will probably remind me at some point.
Yeah, because I'm just like, how do you, that is really dropping the ball there with those. And especially Disney. I'm like, you guys mint toys. How did you not even think to come out? Did they come out with the one for a Goofy, Goofy Adventure, a Goof Troop movie?
The Goofy movie, they made Burger King toys for it. I don't think they made an action figure line.
Damn, see, I'm just like, and now look, when you go into stores, everybody wants like a Goofy movie. Like, I guess the design for that, was it Tevin Campbell who was the singer in that movie?
I think he was, yeah.
Yeah, because everybody wants that character on a T-shirt now. So it's
I'm
like,
shocked, because I remember seeing that in the theaters, and there really wasn't anybody there. And yet, now it's become this cult classic.
I tell you, you give it enough years, people will be like, yo, look at Bebe's Kids. You know, that's a cult classic, and that never came out with any toys either, so I can understand why. You know, they were a little late with everything with that. And so that, I mean, again, that's probably also a little more adult toy, you know, because like you can't let your kids hear where the origin of these toys came from, even though the Bernie Mac show is based on, you know, a very inappropriate act Bernie Mac did. So I'm like, you can clean it up somewhat. And
So another one for me now. This is another like obscure movie that I think they should have done something for it, and they did not. Wayne's World. And you didn't necessarily have to do a whole lot. If you did maybe like some vendables of Wayne and Garth, I would have been cool with that.
that would just see something I would see more Kenner putting out, if anybody.
Yeah, they have like the Wayne's World play set. I don't think they could have made it like the Bill and Ted toys.
Yeah, But I definitely would have think it would be more set on the first film than like the sequel. And
no Wayne stocked.
so, but and just that Garth's little car as something to play with, I could see that being made too. And I mean, really, if you think about like most of the Saturday Night Live movies, they good or bad, you could have made kind of action figures out of all Coneheads. That was like they really wanted that movie to be a hit. And
they made Conehead toys. I have some of them.
Seriously?
Playmates made them.
Oh, jeez. Like, so let me get this straight. No Wayne and Garth, but you'll make Coneheads. Based on an unfunny skit that was on the original Saturday Night Live. Shit, then why not the Killer Bees toys while we're at it?
I think they thought anything with Dan Aykroyd was going to be a hit with kids.
Yeah, Nothing But Trouble. I guess they were like, that's for adults. That's the only reason it bombed.
I was just thinking about that too.
He's like, if this had been for kids, this would have been a hit. But you wanted your violence. So, that wouldn't have been a bad toy line, but definitely for adults.
For adults, yeah.
Hey,
let's just say, I don't think you can make that nose on Dan Aykroyd.
I'd be like, but who wouldn't have wanted the Bone Crusher, like, amusement park ride toy at their house?
Shit freaked me out as a kid.
See, that movie, Dan Aykroyd's character freaked me out. That's the only thing that ever freaked me out about that movie. Everything else, I was fine with. And trying to figure out exactly what they were eating when that was supposed to be like hot dogs or bratwurst.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, that just looks disgusting. You know, but that would have been a kick-ass toy line. But I will go even one, not better, but a little stranger. Dreamscape as the toy line.
That's a movie they have to remake.
I don't know. You can't. There's so much wrong. The
concept is so good, though.
But my thing is, that is a movie that works also because of the effects at the time. And now you know it would all be CGI, and you'd be like, that's fake. That's fake. In that movie, when they pulled out George Wendt's heart, that looked real. Especially when you're a kid, it's like, whoa. You know, that beats Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom. You know, and so I want some dream, preferably not him in his like short shorts though, but everything else, no problem with Dreamscape, the toy line. Another movie which I think has been forgotten unless you grew up around that time. And
well, it's crazy too because the way they marketed that film, like you look at the poster, they made it look like it was going to be like another Indiana Jones, and then you watch the movie and it's like this sci-fi espionage thriller.
They're like, this is not the movie I was promised, but I will go with it.
My next pick here, they actually did make one figure for this particular movie, but they had other plans that they wound up scrapping, and that was Meteor Man.
I'm shocked, but not because I remember how long they held that movie up. Because I remember seeing the poster 2 years before it even came out, waiting for that to come out. And then they kind of just released it like, here you guys go.
I don't remember the name of the... Yeah. I wouldn't... Go ahead there.
I was like, who doesn't want their own thing of Goldilocks? Or the only time Sinbad would have been immortalized in a toy. You know, Robert Guillaume as a toy. Marla Gibbs as a toy. James Earl Jones as a toy. And you could always just give him different hairstyles. That was like pretty much a given. And
so I remember that this African-based company, I don't remember the name of it, but they were the ones that made like, you know, like the Sun Man toys, the Sun Ra.
Yeah, I remember those.
Yeah, so this same company, they had the license to do Meteor Man, and I remember going to the Black Expo that year with my parents when the movie came out, and they were selling bendable figures of Robert Townsend in the Meteor Man costume.
Oh, man.
Back of the package, they didn't have like the actual pictures, but they showed that not only was there a Meteor Man figure, but they were planning to do the Golden Lord, and they were going to do another Back Creations figures.
Oh
So we
Lord.
never got the villains ever produced, only Meteor Man, and I think they sold it very limited in stores in Toys R Us. But then after the movie came out, you never saw them again. But totally, they should have made more of those, and I think it would have helped its box office.
I totally would have bought it, even though, because at the time I loved Meteor Man when it came out. You know,
In the theater.
I saw it only once in the theater, but I'm like, I definitely would have got that. But that was something I immediately bought when it came on video cassette. You know, so I was like, I love that movie. And then now I'd be like, it's got some problems, but you know, it's entertaining. Worthwhile. This one's gonna be more of a modern thing, but I can understand why they never made toys. But I think it would have sold. How come they never made Gladiator toys? And like, you know, you had Russell Crowe, you had him with that stupid mask he could pull down. It's almost like Roman, you know, you have costumes. You have the guy with the scar who used to be his right-hand man. You have Joaquin, you could have Richard Harris. I mean, we made Lord of the Rings toys, even though, you know, obviously that's a very famous book. But I'm like, Gladiator, same thing. Again, kids aren't supposed to be watching it, but you know they are. And that's like,
yeah.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say that Gladiator would have been a perfect way to bring back He-Man if you had Mattel make Gladiator figures in the style of He-Man, and you have your play set characters that he goes up against. You have the tiger. You know, that could have been pretty cool too, and really, like, you know, get boys interested in buying action figures when they were starting to buy more video games back then.
Exactly. Maybe there would have been a Gladiator video game that would have been worth it. And I'm like, but I mean, and could have got him interested in history at the same time. And another lost opportunity. And
so the next movie, this also is a lost opportunity, and it's actually a crime. No figures were made, but there is some trivia that I have to this, and that was Superman the movie.
But does that really count when you already could get like so many Superman figures? Not movie related, obviously, but just in general.
Well, what I found out years later is that Mego, which was like the big toy company in the 1970s, and they were making all these dolls for Superman, for all like the DC Marvel characters. They're also doing all the TV shows. They actually were planning Superman the movie dolls as well as the Star Wars size action figures, but you see, they were going to be cheap about it. They were going to take the molds they already made for their already created Superman figures, but they were going to just change the heads so that the Superman would look like Christopher Reeve, the Lex Luthor would be Gene Hackman's head on the comic book Lex Luthor costume. And the same thing with General Zod and the Phantom Zone villains. They were all going to be pre-made bodies from the comic book, but then just change their heads to look like Terrence Stamp and Sarah Douglas and the other dude. But I think either because of rights issues, licensing issues, maybe they couldn't get the likenesses, they just chose not to put them out. Instead, just put out, like you were just saying, only figures just from the comic book.
Okay. And yeah, I'm surprised. That would have definitely, that's a no-brainer. That would have sold because every kid in the world went to go see that movie. And
definitely by the time Superman 3 came out, Kenner was already making those Kenner superpower figures of all the DC characters. But why not have Superman 3, like a Richard Pryor toy, have the place set up, the big giant computer, do Superman 4 and have Nuclear Man? This was perfect for the 80s. And he just totally... Actually, Superman 4 I can understand, because they screwed that up. They slashed the shit out of that budget. But at least the third one could have had something going on.
That would have been... I'm shocked that there wasn't even just Superman 1 toys. So, you know, that one is shocking. But you would have thought, but after the by the third, like, let's pick up the ball, people. Kids still are buying these action figures, and we're posting these movies. It's not adults going to see these movies. That's why they got kind of simpler and stupider as they went along. What was the one I had? It wasn't a superhero movie, and these might have been toys, because again, I'm not the biggest toy collector, even back in the day of certain things. Did they have Back to the Future toys?
Not at that time.
See, that was a no-brainer. That was made for adults and kids alike, nostalgic value. You have the DeLorean alone that everybody would want. You have Marty McFly in his different outfits. You have the Doc Brown. I mean, Biff, the parents. You could even go with different era parents, like loser parents, rich parents, 1950s parents. And, that would have worked. And
well, I can understand not making figures for the first movie because they didn't know if it was going to be a hit or not. And the whole subplot of Marty's mom falling for Marty, that was like, how are we going to make merchandise for this film? They didn't know.
Well, like how everybody treats the movie now. We act like we don't notice that storyline. Like, what?
But I have a theory that when Part 2 came out, I feel like they were very close to making figures for it. Because LJN, they put out a toy DeLorean, and I have it. It's like, one of those things you crank back and then it rides on its own. And it looked like maybe they were going to have something go on, but then LJN went bankrupt and they only started making video games after that. And then you had the McDonald toys from the cartoon, so that was the closest I remember getting to having like a Marty figure and a Doc figure. Only when Funko Reaction made their Back to the Future set was I like finally feeling like the void was completed when they made Star Wars size figures of Marty and Doc and Biff and George McFly, and now they're coming out with Part 2, hopefully before the end of the summer, and that's going to be all the Part 2 characters and alternate Biff, alternate Marty. I'm really looking forward to that, but I feel like back then, like 89, 1990, that would have been a great time. Maybe even have the time train from the third movie.
And the thing that killed me was then when Back to the Future 2, we all know the infamous behind-the-scenes special where they made it seem like, hey, there are hoverboards. That would have been now, let me get this straight. You're going to spend all that money to do all that promotion. No one here was thinking, maybe we should have made some action figure toys.
Yeah, they made like those little like Micro Machine size DeLorean and the flying taxi and the flying cop car, which my cousin I remember buying and he lost it. And you actually were able to buy them at Universal for a long time when they still had the ride. But yeah, the hoverboard, oh boy, no. Might as well get into the story because I didn't talk about it in my Spielberg episode. So when Back to the Future Part 2 was coming out, NBC did a special of the making of Back to the Future Part 2. And so most of it was focused on the future scenes, everything in 2015, which doesn't look like 2015 now, but it was one of those things where they were talking about this whole hoverboard sequence. And Robert Zemeckis turns to the camera and he goes and he says that the hoverboard's real, but the government won't let us actually sell this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Every freaking parent in America the next day called up Mattel demanding this hoverboard before Christmas because every kid in America wanted it. And finally, when we did get the hoverboard, it was on wheels and it blew up like a grenade. So now that's like, we're nowhere near that point. But at that time, they had to like pull back and say, wait a minute, that the hoverboard's not real. But we'll give you the skateboard that looks like a hoverboard. And it's like, no, that's not good enough. That's false advertising.
No, my kid wants to float. I'm like, oh man, that would have been. But I'm like, how does at the time one of the top earning movies of the year, which is again a family film for the most part, and nobody produced it, and it's produced by Steven Spielberg, so it's not like he doesn't know about merchandising. And this is a man who put a shot in Jurassic Park of all Jurassic Park merchandising, and made it.
Yeah, Kenner could have handled it.
Exactly, and it's like he made it seem integral to the plot. And I'm same thing with Back to the Future. Every thing, like even the big stereos at the beginning, that could have sold at the time. People would have bought that up. Michael J. Fox was the star, you know. I mean, come on, the man sold Pepsi, and you don't think he could have sold some Back to the Future toys?
At least a doll, something. I mean, like
Exactly.
him in his Part 2 outfit.
Or even if it's just the car, the DeLorean, and people would have bought that. And Doc is like a cartoon character himself, so you could get that doll very easily. And
I think it was also there because we had so many DeLorean toys and models. It was kind of like what they did with the Dukes of Hazzard. Everybody loved the Dukes of Hazzard car. Not today, of course, but at that time, every kid in America wanted either the real car or they wanted some kind of toy of it. And they thought, okay, the car was more important than the actual actors. And they proved, because there was a contract dispute at that time that almost screwed that show up, that no, the actors are just as important as the car.
Boo. And I mean, now, obviously, you can get Bill and Ted merchandise. I mean, not Bill and Ted. Back to the Future merchandise wherever you want to. But it would have been nice back in the day to, like, have a genuine, like, you know, toys of the movie. You know, or even if they gave you, like, sold you Marty's vest that he wears throughout the movie. Even a replica of that would have been nice. And
so another movie I have, actually it's another Arnold Schwarzenegger movie that did not have a toy line, The Running Man.
I could see that one because you already can see the playsets. But it would have been like one of the parody commercials you watched during The Running Man. Like, see, Ice decapitate such and such. You know? I don't know if that's going to sell for parents, especially considering during half the movie, his tracksuit has blood on it. You know? I'm like, I don't think that's going to be able to be sold to, like, parents are going to buy that for their 12-year-old, you know? Maybe, like, around the time American Gladiators became a television show, you could have gotten away with it. Just been like, oh, it's like this, only bloodless, like that show. And
they probably could have made figures either like in the He-Man style or even the American Gladiator style. Like Mattel could have handled it and have like a muscular Schwarzenegger figure or Jesse Ventura and all the other like the bad guys he has to fight for. Yeah, I mean, I think it could have totally worked. And again, it's another movie that screamed for it. And there was a board game that was advertised in the film that I'm sure kids would have wanted to buy.
But would Stephen King have sold the rights to Let It Be? Sold the kids.
Probably not, because it's not like any other movie he did.
Exactly, that was one of his under his pseudonym. So
if he had put out the truck from Maximum Overdrive with the Green Goblin head, he would have got sued.
Yeah, and well, I don't think he would have cared at the time because that was during his heavy cocaine addiction. So his lawyers would have had to inform him of that. So, because let's face it, most people only went to see that movie to see that truck. So it wasn't like I saw the preview like, oh, Stephen King directed a movie. I was like, I want to see that truck with the Green Goblin. And that, oh man, if Marvel would have just cut a deal with him. Oh my God, that would have been the collectible item. People would have had that going up against Optimus Prime on the playground. And that is how iconic that was. And it's really the only memorable thing about the movie, too. And unless you watch, you know, the trailer for it where you see Steven Spiel coked out of his mind trying to describe it. So, I'm going to put, since we've only mentioned one teen movie, really, I know they probably wouldn't, but this would have been the closest they got. You mentioned Ferris Bueller earlier. Mm-hmm. How no weird science toys? And
you know what? That would have been cool to have, yeah.
It would have been hard to sell Chet, though, as all that piece of shit to kids. Kids would have wanted it, though. But then when they asked their parents, what is he exactly? That would have been an interesting conversation. And then you could have, like, Lamborghini and Porsche models. You could have that deteriorating house. I'm like, that is something. And you'd have, like, characters in sharp 80s suits. And plus Robert Downey Jr. and I can't remember his name, as the bullies. And
Yeah, and Vernon Wells playing basically his Mad Max character.
that might have been a problem trying to get those rights.
Uh-huh.
And then, of course, the Lisa doll. Every girl would have wanted it. And
totally.
unfortunately, some boys. So, for their own nefarious reasons. But I'm telling you, that one could have sold itself. That's the closest I really feel like John Hughes would have had to, like, a toy line. And except, later in his career when he was writing kids' movies.
Yeah,
And
there were plenty of kids' movies that he had toys for.
did Baby's Day Out have a toy line?
No, but 101 Dalmatians did.
Oh, of course. I would have liked the Baby's Day Out toy line, no. You only got to really make 4 figures. And one would be Joe Montana.
Yeah, he hasn't gotten his due yet as a figure.
This is a man who was in Witless Protection with Larry the Cable Guy. I want to know the story of how that happened.
He had bills to pay.
Obviously.
So another one that I think it wasn't a hit at the time and probably could have been saved by merchandising, the Monster Squad.
Yeah, I could see that working.
Maybe you don't make the kids at that time, but if you made the actual monsters, I think it could have helped.
It definitely would have helped with the Merman, because I know that one I would have won. Frankenstein? Okay, I'll take it. It's Dracula with, the crazy look. That's one of my... The actor gives a good performance, but his look as Dracula, he looks so skinny and weak that it's a little hard to believe. And Monster Squad watching it now has many problems for me, but at the time watching it, that was my main problem with the movie. And, you don't even notice that, the sister's supposed to be a virgin until you get older and then you learn what that means. And it's like, oh, I get it. Plus, you could have got Fat Kid or Horace, the dog.
Yeah, Horace.
With the shotgun.
Yeah.
That definitely would have been a bestseller.
Yeah, Monster Squad was one of those movies. I never saw it as a kid because, I rarely ever saw it on cable. And I only watched it, 10 years ago when the Blu-ray came out.
Wow.
And I was like, you know what? I didn't grow up on this movie, but I am nostalgic to it because, looking at the kids' bedrooms, especially, I think David Faustino's brother was in the film, and his bedroom had, a Punisher poster, a Spider-Man poster. It was all the posters that were in my room as a kid. And I said, that's basically my childhood. That's one of the few movies that actually caught my childhood accurately, minus the monsters.
I liked that movie, I'll admit, because one of the only actors I remembered at the time who I knew who that was Ryan, the one who played the rebellious tough kid, was on that show, Kids Incorporated. So that was one of the main reasons I wanted to see that movie. At the time, I thought it was equal to Goonies. Now I'm like, Goonies is still way better. But I respect it for what it is. It's definitely one of those things that's more of a childhood nostalgic favorite. I can still watch it. But I think I watched it a few years ago, and I found myself surprisingly this isn't as good as I remember it being as a kid. It's not horrible, but it's not that great either, that it should be, resurrected, necessarily. That, I could maybe go with being remade. And, I'm that I could deal with being remade. I wouldn't be, sacrilegious to remake that movie. I'd be yeah, remake it.
Michael Bay's company was supposed to remake it, and it fell apart.
Okay, Michael Bay, stop touching things people like. Because it's break it as soon as you touch it. Because he'd want to change it. Now they're aliens. Just taking over monster bodies. And there would have been, a lot more gun violence for no reason. It's he would take all the innocence and fun out of it. And then somehow, the Monster Squad's mom would be a Megan Fox busty and, just firing guns, and somehow she keeps losing part of her outfit.
You would take the virgin angle to a whole new level.
Oh, with him, she'd be oh, does the butt count? And I'd be oh, this is not for children. No. So I'd be but if you gave that to somebody like J.J. Abrams with like a Super 8 type of mentality, that movie could work. Or even
Super 8 didn't have a toy line.
I see. My thing is with modern movies, it's really hard to really see, unless it's definitely for children, it ever having a toy line. Again, I think half the time these movies just figure, oh, if it's popular, they'll pick it up, eventually. Some movie like McFarlane Toys or again, Funko will make it. But, while Funkos are nice, it's not like they're, facsimiles that you want. Which brings me to another movie I am shocked never had a toy line. How does Scott Pilgrim versus the World never have a toy line?
Yes, that deserved it 100%.
And I'm like, and I don't mean the Funko toys or even based on the comic book. I want the movie character likenesses toys, It's the only time you'll see a Michael Cera action figure. But a Ramona Flowers, I'm like, come on. That's like to punk girls, like they're Madonna. You have Jason Schwartz. Let's face it, most of the people in this movie, other than Chris Evans, will most likely never have an action figure, except for Brie Larson. But I'm like, come on. How does that not? You have a whole set, 7 X's. Just the villains all together, you already have a line. Then you make the good or heroic figures. And kids can watch it. They might not understand half of it, but you at least can sell them the toys. You made a video game out of it. So, and now they're talking about maybe making it into an anime cartoon to continue it, which I'm all for. And so I'm like, how did that never get a toy line? Even a limited edition toy line. I'll even accept plush toys.
I think toys would have certainly gotten more kids to see that. I feel like it totally dropped the ball on the marketing on that film.
Marketing, yes, definitely. They could have come up with a better. I like the trailer, but unless you're familiar with the property, this trailer means nothing to anyone else. And so
I felt
that's
like the marketing was as close to like something like Mystery Men.
Oh, that is a line I'm glad never came out with toys, because that movie is bad. Even though
thought that was going to be another Ghostbusters.
No, I was like, that movie I had such high hopes for because I liked the cast, but then I saw the movie and I was like, oh, this is horrible. Do you remember one of these websites used to have this thing where you could be a movie mogul for the summer and you would buy certain movies and then your points would be how much it made in its first 2 weeks? And
yes, I vaguely remember it, but I'm aware of it.
And that was one of the movies I picked. And when it bombed, I was like, no! And then I saw it and I realized why this bombed. But yeah, I'm not even going to put on my list for things I wish had toys, because even though it bombed, I would never want those toys either.
Next on my list, this was something I thought about today, and I never really thought about it before, Rush Hour. Because it wasn't a Jackie Chan figure. I was thinking about Rumble in the Bronx, but I said no, Rush Hour would have been more fun.
I mean, I think out of Rush Hour, you could probably get more figures than you could for Rumble in the Bronx. But I'm like, you'd have to more go with like Rush Hour 2 than Rush Hour. Because I feel like Rush Hour 2 has more characters, has more like a memorable villain or villains, plus Zhang Ziyi. Whereas, I mean, first one, you have Chris Tucker, you have Jackie Chan, maybe Michael Wright you could have as a figure. That's about it. Unless you want to include Clifton Powell. It
could have had like some nice little Jackie Chan type stunts from the movie, and each figure has like its own sort of like you remember with Karate Kid, they all had like their little martial arts maneuvers. Everybody could do like one guy could do a chop, one guy could do a kick, and a spring loaded. That could have been pretty awesome.
I would have liked to. Well, now I would like to. At the time, I would have been like, "This is shit," but it would have been nice to see like a Tom Wilkinson doll, And Yeah, okay, he's a villain in the first movie, but see, that's what I said. Rush Hour 2, more interesting villains, and that you can actually make action figures out of. Except, I don't know what you're gonna do with an Alan King doll. Guess you could have him fight Taggart from Beverly Hills Cop doll. Same shape and baldness. What was? See, it was on the tip of my tongue. A great. I might have to pass this one because I'm still trying to remember it. What was the next action film? Because you were on to something with Rush Hour. Oh, I remember.
Okay.
How did this movie not have toys, even though it tries to copy Star Wars, but with European fashion? How is there no Fifth Element toy line? And
I'm with you on that. The Fifth Element totally screamed action figure.
Exactly. I mean, well dressed, action figures, but I mean, come on, the Lilu in the dress, the white strappy dress. You have the monk played by Ian Holm. You have whatever the hell Gary Oldman's supposed to be playing there with his weird hair and bowl helmet. You have all those different alien species. I mean, it's like, I'm going to no, this one deserves it more, but you could even include, even though it bombed huge, Valerian, and what was it, and the 29 Planets?
Yeah.
I mean...
Jane DeHaan just turned me off the whole thing.
Interestingly to me, Cara Delevingne turned me off from that movie. But I mean, another space adventure, tons of aliens. Like, if they were to encapsulate the first 10 minutes of that into an animated short, that film would be legendary. Unfortunately, the movie goes on past those 10 minutes, and that's where everything goes downhill. But I would rather the Fifth Element have toys, but I will double down on both those movies having toys. Because, again, they're more made for teenagers. You cannot watch, even though it appeals to adults, you cannot tell me an adult is watching The Fifth Element or Valerian and being like, yeah, this is my type of movie. It's made for teens. And
come to think of it now, I do think that there are like Super 7 reaction figures of The Fifth Element, but they've only made Bruce Willis, Gary Oldman, and Mila Jovovich. They haven't made like any of the creatures.
See, how do you not make Chris Tucker?
Well, yeah, kids playing with that character.
I mean,
It's a different climate back then.
Hey, he has many different outfits, and just the bug eyes and the hairdo alone.
It reminds me of the Stargate toys from Hasbro. They had Jay Davidson's character as a figure, but it looked nothing like Jay Davidson in the movie.
Well, then not even like when he was like that possessed alien-looking thing.
Oh no, it's when he's possessed, but it just looks nothing like him. He just looks like a regular pharaoh.
Then what's the whole point of that? Even though I hate Stargate, the movie, it's like, okay, you wasted everyone's time. If you were going to do, well, my thing is, if I was a doll maker to counter, I'd make the Jay Davidson crying game toy. It'd be like, here you go. Now all you have to do is undress it, and then you can make it into a Stargate figure. Almost the same look.
I think our friend Sylvia would enjoy that.
I'm surprised she hasn't made one herself. Okay, I'm just one more for me before we go back to yours. You can go double or triple after this.
Okay.
How come there was no Spaceballs toys? There's a whole section of merchandising in it.
That was on my list also.
I'm like, because when I was thinking of Stargate, I'm like, wait. And I'm thinking of Fifth Element, and I'm like, wait, Star Wars type movie. How does Spaceballs not get toys? It's like, especially Dark Helmet.
So the story behind that, this is actually also tying into how I got into Star Wars.
Okay.
What happened was I saw Spaceballs before I ever saw any Star Wars movies.
Wow.
Maybe a little bit of the first one on TV, but I had never seen The Empire Strikes Back, Return to Jedi, or the whole New Hope all the way through. So I remember when I saw Spaceballs and they had the scene with yogurt, with the Spaceballs t-shirt, Spaceballs the action figures and the flamethrower. I wanted those figures so badly as a kid. Then to find out many years later in the documentary that Mel Brooks can only get George Lucas to sign off on being okay with parodying Star Wars if he didn't sell toys.
Oh
So
man.
so there's only like there are prototypes that are from the film that I think they're sold in limited quantity, and they're very expensive if you ever see them on eBay. But they're just like regular, they're like PVCs. They don't move, nothing. They don't even really look great up close. But I remember because of that movie, I now wanted to get the Star Wars toys, and in turn got into the film and tried to find the figures in the flea markets.
Ooh.
And that was like almost like this turnaround thing where I was into the parody before I got into the real thing, and then started to go after all the figures from the real film.
Nah, see, I was with Star Wars from the beginning. And, that's why I like Spaceballs so much, because it was like, oh, this is perfect for parodying. But I mean, but then again, I've always liked Blazing Saddles more than anything. And so, okay, your next pick.
Yeah, there's only like a couple left, but I got some fun ones here.
Okay.
So this is actually a really bad movie, but I think at the time, because of the craze of that period, there should have at least been one or two figures for this movie. No Holds Barred with Hulk Hogan.
Well, I would have figured if they put out that toy, WWF would have had the rights anyway, and all they really would have had to come out with a Zeus toy.
Yeah, that would have been it. I mean, look, it was at the time when I think LJN was on the last tail of making the wrestling figures before Hasbro took over. Somewhere in that time, I know there were a lot of Hulk Hogan toys, but all you had to do was just take one that pre-existed, paint it over in blue with the Rip-'em logo, and there you go. You have your Rip figure, and then you make a Zeus figure for him to wrestle, and that would have been it. Or I mean, unless you want to make like those tough guys that Zeus beats up. That's all you would have to make. And plus, Zeus was in the WWF. Why not make a Zeus figure for your other wrestlers to fight with?
Exactly. And I definitely would have gotten a Zeus toy if they would have came out with that. I doubt they were going to make the figure I'd want, though. The guy who just yells, Dookie! That guy I want the figure of. And,
yeah, or the jock-ass guy, who, Kurt Fuller's character.
Yeah, or the guy, or the villain, the main villain, the businessman. And
what if they, it would have been the progressive thing if they made Hogan's brother, who was in the wheelchair.
Oh, yeah, you could have him wheel into to help him save the day. Well, it would make more sense than having Joan Severance figure for her as the love interest, really.
That would have been easy. Just get a Miss Elizabeth toy and paint it over.
Well, again, since we're in the WWF, it's like, all you guys really got to do is repaint and make some more. And I totally would have bought those toys, though. And maybe the movie would have been a hit. Or a bigger.
On the Hulk Hogan kick, there should have also been Suburban Commando toys, too.
Shoot, they should have just had Vince McMahon play the villain anyway. Let's face it, it's kind of thinly veiled there. Except Vince McMahon probably would have picked somebody better looking to play him. That's the only difference.
Listen, I know that Vince, he made a lot of money being a top bad guy in the late 90s when he was feuding with Stone Cold Steve Austin. But if he was doing that in the early 90s, when Hogan, Savage, and Warrior, all those guys were around, I think a lot more money could have been made back then. 'Cause it would have been more crazier than what we saw in the Attitude Era.
Well, I think at that point he was just trying to be like, yeah, I'm just going to be the commentator and act like I don't own the league. That's all Jack Tunney. All I'm here for is I'm one of the top commentators,
Where's Jack Tunney now when we need him?
Oh, that guy's dead. But, I remember when everything we had to go through, Jack Tunney made the big decision, knowing Vince McMahon was making all these decisions behind the scenes. And what's your next one?
The next one I have, there have been at least two figures made for this movie, but they never made all the other characters, and that's Escape from New York.
Okay, I can see that.
So there's been two different Snake Plissken toys. McFarlane made one based on Escape from LA, and that was back, I think, in 2000 they made that figure. And the other is recently from Reaction. They had like a Star Wars size Snake Plissken toy. But when they announced it originally for Reaction, I thought they were going to make all the other characters. So you get Lee Van Cleef, you get Adrian Barbeau, you get Harry Dean Stanton, and they didn't do those characters. They just stuck with Snake Plissken. I want an Isaac Hayes toy, for Christ's sake.
You'd have to hope they come out with an "I'm gonna get you sucker" toy line for that one.
Oh, I'm salivating for that.
Oh, you know that will never come. Shoot, I mean, look at when they made Black Panther toys, and then due to the demand, they didn't even expect to happen. They had to go make all those, and so it became very scarce. Now the movie's like a few years old. It's easy to find merchandise, but when the movie came out, it was very hard to find any Black Panther movie merchandise. And
then,
I have one that I know will never get made.
Yeah.
How about Mario Van Peebles Panther movie action figures? Education for the kids and movie tie-in. And
it's funny, that same company that made the Meteor Man figures, they could have done Panther figures very realistically, because they were also making, they made like a Martin Luther King toy, they made a Bill Clinton toy. I think they even did a Malcolm X figure, and they were selling them in Toys R Us, like these educational toys. Yeah, you could have had a Panther figure set.
Exactly. How does that? Well, I mean, I can understand why maybe a major company wouldn't want them to do that, but I mean, it's something for like more the independent toy maker. That would have been perfect. And
you know, I'll do you one better. If we're talking about black films, what about Cool Runnings?
that would have been good, because that's, again, family entertainment. And you'd be like, I got the Dougie Doug. Oh, I got the Malik Yoba. And be like, I got the Leon. And then somebody be like, I got the John Candy. You know, that would have been like a perfect commercial. And though, if you make that toy line, are we only making the Jamaican bobsled team and coach, or do we make the Swiss rivals? And
I think you got to do the Swiss rivals. They got to have some opponent, not just like ride the bobsled place up by themselves.
that's true. And you could give them like their Jamaican bobsled team. You have them when they're back in the Caribbean, and you can have them when they're at the cowboy bar. And
speaking of Disney, now I don't think they could have made figures, but they could have done at least they could have done one of those foosball sets. What about Mighty Ducks?
I figured they made all their money on those damn jerseys, you know. But I mean, it would have been a cute toy line, which then makes no sense as to why when they made the cartoon it was actual literal ducks instead of just making it like, hey, kids, you know, like a little league thing of hockey for kids. But I mean, I could see it. I mean, they say the name Goldberg enough during the movie that you could have had a Goldberg doll. And
yeah,
I mean,
was just thinking like they could have done like one of those hockey sets that they had. Like they did it for Ninja Turtles, they did it for the WWF. You could have had like one side being the Ducks, the other side being the Hawks, and you're just playing like actual like stand-up hockey with your friend.
yeah, but would anybody really want to be the Hawks?
Well, there's a lot of people want to be Cobra Kai, so why not?
Okay, so yeah, that's true. But I'm like, I mean, I could see it definitely. Again, this is the most disappointing is when it's these companies whose whole business seems to be to appeal to children, and it's like none of you guys thought like dolls. You know, the simplest thing you could have done. That it was like, no, let's do video games, let's do clothing, let's do lunch boxes, but action figures, oh no. I don't get that mentality. And
yeah,
that would be like, hey, I'm gonna put out these Thundercats cartoons. We don't need dolls. We'll just start selling swords and nunchucks. That's it. It's like, come on. Remember who your audience is.
So yeah, I think I have two more here. I have the Lost Boys.
That I could see a little harder getting past parents groups, but I mean, it's a horror toy. I mean, just
Maybe
for
not back when it came out, but I think McFarlane could have really did a killer job on it in the 90s.
I mean, definitely with the Frog Brothers, David, Michael, Star. What was the kid's name? Lanny, who was the kid vampire?
I think so.
Yeah, him. You know, you could sell that one. I don't think anybody cares about Marco. You know, it's like you could buy a Bill toy and then just throw him in a bathtub where he melts or stab him in the heart, and you got a Marco toy. And I mean, has Billy Zane ever been caricatured into a action figure for any of his roles?
That was going to be my next film, The Phantom.
See, I want to give you that one, but I hated that movie.
I didn't like the movie either, but I think it could have been saved by a merchandising plan.
The only way by the merchandising plan could have been saved is if we go to the cartoon series, because I liked that. Because my thing is, if you're going to do that to save a film, why not The Shadow with Alec Baldwin?
Well, The Shadow did have an action figure line.
Why? Why?
It was
all he does is make suggestions. And was it? I'm not gonna fat shame, but was it weight appropriate for Alec Baldwin at the time?
Yes, but I think they made him a little too tall.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, like my thing is, if you're gonna do that, then why was there no The Getaway remake toys?
Well, that was like so explicitly sexual.
Hey, you want Lost Boys? There's a whole love scene between Star and Michael.
But it was a teenage vampire movie.
I am just putting a sex scene in a cops and robbers scenario. We don't have to make the Jennifer Tilly toy.
Well, look, you had RoboCop where he shot a guy in the dick and they still made a toy of him.
Yeah, there's much worse than RoboCop, and that still became a toy. So anytime anybody's like, "How could you release that?" RoboCop and Rambo, and you still bought your kids the toys.
Police Academy.
Well, that one's a little. If they would have, I really wish they would have made a missing in action toy just for the rat in the bag scene. You'd then be like, if that can be made into an action figure, anything can be made into an action figure.
Well, we got Chuck Norris Karate Commandos. That's the closest thing ever to that.
Like I said, the only Chuck Norris toy I would buy is if it was missing in action too, or maybe Walker Texas Ranger.
I would want his character in Code of Silence with the drone robot.
Oh, which one? Oh, I want the one, the Hitman, where he slicks his hair back and carries a shotgun, even though he's doing martial arts throughout the whole movie. That is a Chuck Norris figurine I would buy. Or worse, if they made Sidekicks toys with him, Jonathan Brandis, and Winnie Cooper.
Oh, that would be cool.
Where they try not to rip off the Karate Kid too much. I'm like, oh man, I wouldn't have bought those at the time though. I would have been like, nah. Though, wait, Sequaz DSV had toys, right?
Yeah, Playmates made them.
Okay, so at least Jonathan Brandis can be remembered in that toys line.
And Roy Scheider.
What?
Although they did a Funko reaction of Jaws of Chief Brody, so he's got other figures besides the Captain and
Yeah, because I was gonna say, for that matter, think of how Robert Shaw feels. He's like, I've been in so many iconic movies, not one action figure at the time.
Well, yeah, at the time. Now he has a Jaws figure.
Yeah, but it's not like anybody's going out there and be like, hey, I've got the Sting toy too for you.
You know what also surprises me is that as popular as James Bond has been, I've seen a lot of car toys made of all of his cars and any of his gadgets, but yet the only time you really made like a good action figure line was James Bond Jr. Now I know like some of the movies had like the Sean Connery era, there were like these little like unmovable little PVC figures. I know Moonraker had a bunch of dolls, but I would have wanted like at least one of the films to have like a really cool James Bond action figure set, not dolls, just like something like either GI Joe size or Kenner size with Bond and all of his classic villains and the girl.
Well, there's only one movie I would want to see the action figures from, and is Live or Let Die. That's the one with Yaphet Kotto, right?
Yeah.
There you go. You have plenty of characters for your own James Bond action film set. You have, what's his name? The one who did the voice of the crab in Little Mermaid.
Blanking on his name, but I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, his character alone you have there. You have
Baron Samedi.
Yeah, you have the racist sheriff. You have Jane Seymour looking her best ever in a movie. You have Yaphet Kotto as the big villain with really bad makeup that we're not supposed to figure out it's him. And then you have Yaphet Kotto as supposedly the right-hand man character. I'm like, you just have it. You could even recreate the assassination at the parade in the middle of the street. That's the one movie I really would have wanted to see a toy line for, because it's just so outrageous that you have nothing but opportunity there. And
have Bond with the Pitmobile in New York.
Exactly. See, this stuff writes itself for toys. And the worst part, since they made toys of almost everything back then anyway, it would have fit perfectly in with all the other play sets.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm like, why? I mean, I guess now they're doing these legacy ones where it's like, oh, this character from this movie and this character from this movie. But I'm like, if you just want to do strictly one movie, it would be that one for me, even though I know it's not its most popular, film, but it's the one that works the best for me. And
I think the one for me would be GoldenEye.
See, I feel like since it has a video game, it's well represented.
Yeah. But I think the game just made it so popular, why not make figures from that?
I can see that. And the sad part is all these movies we're probably talking about, if you play HeroClix, you could probably get figures of all of these. And so, but I don't play HeroClix. I've played it once or twice, but I don't actually, collect all those figures. And
I feel like somebody's going to tackle that one day. Somebody's going to go back to that GoldenEye game and start making figures that look like they did in the actual game. So they'll make like a Dr. Dope, and he'll like stand like this, frozen in his science suit. They'll come with something weird contraption.
Well, I mean, there's enough people who love the James Bond films. I'm sure somebody's making their homemade ones that are probably very impressive.
I'm exhausted with all of these, and I mean, I'm sure there's probably others I could think of, but then I have to think way too hard to figure out which one.
Or I just pick ones that I know would never have toys, but be like, it'd be nice if there was a toy line of that, but I know no one in their right mind would. Like, how come you can put out the cards in the movie, but there's no Garbage Pail Kids toys? And
good question.
Other than they'd be disgusting. But you had Cabbage Patch Kids. And so why not Garbage Pail Kids dolls? And
why not 7 figures?
Why not? Oh, God. They covered this on one of those YouTube documentaries. It's sort of like Enemy Mine. It's with a young Molly Ringwald. And
I'm blanking on name, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, like, why did they not make toys for that movie? I actually liked that movie back in the day. It was on HBO all the time. Or how come there was no Westworld when it came out in the 70s movie? Toy.
Yeah, that could have. I could see some Mego figures for that.
Exactly. I'm like, come on, this stuff sells itself. Omega Man with Charlton Heston, since he's such, the man's man in action movies back then. And
I mean, it was so crazy. They made figures from Butch Cassidy, Butch and Sundance early years.
Oh.
And recycled those figures for the Raiders of the Lost Ark set.
See, if everything's coming full circle, and I'm like, especially now, I guess you can get them custom made because it doesn't seem like too many things are coming out with their own signature toy lines anymore. You know, I mean, if Disney would have put out Artemis Fowl toys, they'd be in trouble now, considering nobody liked that movie. And I haven't seen it, so I can't really talk about it. But, you know, I'm just like, I don't know. It's just like another way. And like, if I had kids today, I'd be a little disappointed because there's like 50,000 movies for them to see, but barely any toys that they can actually play with, you know? Because like, oh yeah, you could get figurines like once they discover Back to the Future, but all those toys are stuff you like keep in storage or, you know, keep in place so that they don't get broken, you know, or don't lose value. But there's nothing for them to literally really play with. So, and I think
that's the marketplace now too. It's just that kids are more inclined to play video games or play with their iPad, tablets, and all those, you know, little contraptions that if it's not on a screen, then they don't care. They're not going to go and, I mean, unless it's like a Black Panther or Marvel or even like wrestling figures, they're not running out and buying those toys and playing with them like they've seen the movie. That's why, you know, Star Wars figures are not selling the way they used to. Yes, The Mandalorian did well and everybody wants a Baby Yoda, but there's a cap on how much. You think people really want to buy an Oscar Isaac figure or John Boyega? It's not that they're terrible actors. They're great, but their characters are not interesting enough to make a kid say, oh, I want to buy their action figure. I think if it was different, you would see bigger sales than what you see right now.
Well, I also feel like that's another thing that's missing is that we don't have like those iconic characters anymore because most of them are either watered down or we've seen them before that you would want to buy those. That's why, like, you know, you don't hear like any Channing Tatum character from any of his movies, like being like, oh, when he played such and such, oh, that was so memorable. Or, you know, he is such an iconic actor. It's because even out of all the action films he's played in, they're all disposable. Even The Kingsman, where he had a bit role, it's still a disposable role. You know, what's his name? Taron Egerton has had more iconic roles than, you know, Channing Tatum has had. And
the crazy thing is, Channing Tatum played Duke in G.I. Joe. He got an action figure, he got a doll in one of those accelerator suits, and yet when they did the sequel, they sidelined him and they got The Rock as Roadblock, and he was the full-on lead.
But I also think Channing Tatum kind of wanted out of that series the more famous he got, too. So that was why, like, you know, they kind of got rid of him, too. And, you know, and then when The Rock was willing to be like, hey, I'll do it, they're like, okay, see you, Channing. You know, go out and do your like romantic movies or comedies, you know. And that's why now it seems like more Channing Tatum is more devoted to, I guess, drama. And, you know, because he's always in Steven Soderbergh movies or, you know, trying to figure out how to make Magic Mike more money from that series because obviously they're never going to make a third. But I know he wanted to make that into a stage show somehow. And so. And maybe once Broadway comes back, that's what he's been doing in quarantine, coming up with the musical. I mean, he is dating a musician, Jessie J, so you never know.
Yeah, he's got to reevaluate his career since he wasted all that time trying to get that Gambit movie made.
You know, my thing is when you're developing a movie, it doesn't mean you don't have to work in other movies. So,
yeah, exactly.
I'm like, look at Hugh Jackman. He's always working and he's developing movies. But also Hugh Jackman has his own action figure, so
exactly.
Maybe that's the whole thing for Channing Tatum was just trying to find a character where he could finally have his own toy, and he realized the Kingsman wasn't going to be it, and so.
All right, so I think we're going to just wrap this up. You want to plug your stuff as usual?
Okay, you could check me out on Instagram at UnfinishedB1, or you could check out my movie reviews at cuttothechase.video.blog. And I also have a Instagram for that page, pretty much the same, cuttothechase_reviews. And of course, there's always Cinefiles,
cinephilestv.blogspot.com. That's always still there. Other than that, that's pretty much all I have to plug this time.
And as always, for us, you can follow us on Facebook, the Silver Screen Action Figure Podcast. You can like us on Facebook there, and you can see all of our updates, past episodes. You can follow us on Twitter at SilverScreenAF1. And if you have questions, comments, suggestions, hate mail, you could email me at silverscreenafpodcast@gmail.com. So this was another fun one, Jeff. I'm glad you were able to come on. And if you guys have suggestions about other movies you would like to see as action figures, let us know in the comments. And please, if you have not seen my movie Vendetta Games, that is out right now on Amazon Prime, on Tubi, and you can buy it in Walmart, Target, and the Turner Classic Movie Shop, which I'm still shocked about. So that's basically about it, guys, and I will see you at the movies.